Hey everybody, Techie101 here. It's a very nice kind of winterscape day today. You have the snow falling outside, so I stayed inside mostly in my nice warm area making videos, and I thought, you know what, I should share a story with you guys. It's story time with Teching. Come and sit on my lap. Okay, that's a little weird. You don't have to sit on my lap, and it's not like you're here right now, but you don't have to. It's okay. My finals for school were last week, and one of my finals, in fact, the last one I had, was for my magazine writing course. And the assignment we had is we had to write a story. We had like a 2-hour time slot that we had to write a story and then turn it in. And I have the assignment right here. I'll read it to you. Recall a fairy tale or other well-known story and tell that story from another point of view. For example, you could take the story of Goldilocks and retell it from the point of view of the bear's interior decorator, who is upset that the little girl broke the baby bear's chair he just imported from France. Very specific sort of example there, but the general premise is take a fairy tale or other well-known story. It didn't necessarily have to be a fairy tale. One of the students did Toy Story. Pick a story and tell it from another perspective. You know, go all Shrek on it. You know, take it from a direction that you wouldn't normally expect, you know. So I spent a few minutes digging around trying to figure out what fairy tale I wanted to, you know, spin. And eventually I arrived at Jack and the Beanstalk. And the story I'm going to tell you today is Tekking's version of Jack and the Beanstalk. Spoiler alert, 22 people die in my version. Also, I was going to take it, when I was coming up with ideas, I came up with, oh man, wouldn't it be weird if it's like Jack and the Beanstalk, but like the giants are the ones that are the victims? Like Jack gets to the top of the beanstalk and just like kills all the giants, and he has to go to like giant court, and there's like an entire society of giants. And then I stopped and thought to myself, oh wait a second, Rick and Morty already did that shit. And then I thought, like, well, maybe I could write that anyway and he just wouldn't know. But I felt like no, because on the off chance that my professor, even if he's not a fan of Rick and Morty, if he's just flipping through the channels one day and he sees it and he's like, that he ripped that straight. I don't want to plagiarize, all right? So I wrote my own version, which I will share with you today. Now, you know, I decided to write this, I guess it's in first person, sort of, or third person. I don't know which person. I might jump around a little bit. This isn't this isn't an assignment I had time to prepare on. This is just something I went right for it. But this story is from the perspective of a police officer. So just to give you that idea. All right, so let's begin. The police car raced down the unpaved dirt path to the old farmhouse. Even though the car was miles away from its destination, Officer Benjamin Tabbert, that's the main character's name, Benjamin Tabbert, look it up, could see the tiny house on the horizon in front of the truly massive beanstalk that stretched up to the sky beyond the clouds themselves. Officer Tabbert had to keep his eyes on the road, but kept glancing upwards. He could simply not believe the spectacle. Upon arriving at the house, which had been flooded with other police officers and a slew of journalists, he stepped out of his cruiser with a stunned look on his face. What the hell? Freaking giant ass, what the freak? Oh man, that's crazy. The journalists and camera crews were all placed around the beanstalk, relaying the strange new plant life to the rest of the world. Tabbert was about to walk over to get a closer look himself when another officer, the sergeant, approached him. Ah, glad to see you're here, Officer Tabbert, the sergeant stated as if all was normal. Yeah, right. Well, I got the call and, I just actually couldn't believe it was true. I mean, like, yeah, I know you got a lot of questions, but we need your help here. So if you could just go interview the mother over there on the porch. She's the one that made the call. Apparently her kid's missing. The sergeant calmly explained the situation while pointing over to the visibly distraught mother on the porch of the farmhouse. Her kid is missing? I think we have a bigger problem here, Sarge. I mean, where did this giant tree thing even come from? It's not a tree, actually. According to the FBI's botany division, it's a giant beanstalk, actually. The sergeant corrected him. Oh, well, everything just makes so much sense now, Officer Tabbert said sarcastically while walking over to the porch, approaching the middle-aged woman. He cares about his job, but he's not afraid to give some lip. That's what I like about Officer Tabbert. So he goes over to the woman, woman's on the porch, wearing her nightgown, pacing, like, what the freaking beanstalk? What's going on? Officer Tabbert walks up to her. Hi, ma'am. I'm Officer Tabbert. I'm going to need to ask you a few questions about, everything, ma'am. Just everything. What all happened here this morning? The woman had tears streaming down her red, puffy face, but collected herself and spoke in a very soft yet crackled voice. I suppose I can try, I guess. Well, I suppose it happened, last night with my son. I think that's where it all started. What's your son's name, ma'am? Officer Tabbert took out a notepad and a pen and began writing down notes as he interrogated the woman. Jack, the woman muttered. My son's name is Jack. And what did Jack do last night? Was he responsible for this beanstalk back here? Tabbert scribbled some notes down while glancing up at the woman. Well, I'm not sure. You see, he came back home last night from trying to sell our cow. You see, it stopped giving milk a fortnight ago, and, well, the silly boy, he traded it for a bunch of useless beans. The mother shouted with more frustration in her voice than sadness. Wait a minute, Officer Tabbert interjected. How old is your son? 10. He's 10. Why? You send a 10-year-old to walk for miles alone to sell a cow? Yes, well, you see, we needed the money, and when he came home without any, I sent him to bed without any supper. Officer Tabbert looked at the woman in a very confused manner before stating very sternly, You know, ma'am, what you did, sending your son alone to walk for miles with a cow, unattended, and then after he comes back home from this mile-long journey refusing to feed him, you do know that could be considered child abuse, right? Well, I don't think that's any of your concern. Besides, what person trades a cow for beans? He's 10! This is exactly what you should have expected. This is the outcome I would expect if you send a 10-year-old to go sell a cow, getting distracted by the first guy that, hey kid, you want some beans? He tried to calm the woman down and calming down himself, but he realized that he had to finish interrogating. We're still not anywhere near figuring out where the hell the beanstalk came from. Okay, ma'am. I apologize for shouting. We'll deal with the treatment of your child later. But let's talk about this beanstalk, okay? Because that's really the main issue here. Where did this thing come from? Well, after he gave me those useless beams, I threw those silly things on the ground. I ate my dinner and I went to bed, and then when I woke up, there was this massive beanstalk in my backyard. I mean, how am I supposed to deal with that, really? The mother explained her situation. And that's all you know, ma'am? It just sprang up overnight, just like that? Yes, officer, and I saw my son climbing up the darn thing, and so that's when I called you. Wait a minute. Jack climbed up that massive beanstalk? Well, yes, but you let your son climb up that thing? It's like miles high! Well, yes, I did, but I don't understand. I mean, that's why I called you. He's like, excuse me, ma'am. Attention all units. We have an unaccompanied child on that beanstalk. We need choppers, climbers, every search and rescue team you can get dispatched immediately. Tabbert barked the orders into his radio with extreme urgency. Well, wait a minute, what's going on? I don't understand. Okay, ma'am, you need to come with me. You are under arrest for the endangerment of a child. Everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. Tabbert removed a pair of handcuffs from his belt and began to handcuff the woman, completing the rights that she has issued. Tabbert continued reading the woman her rights as he began walking her to his cruiser as the rest of the police began mobilizing to rescue Jack. It was at that moment a large shadow began to appear over them. Tabbert and the rest of the onlookers gleamed upwards as if in disbelief, as if something was falling from the sky. What the hell's that thing? Upon closer inspection, the object appeared to be a human being, albeit gigantic in size. The giant man landed several miles away from the farmhouse, but the impact felt like an atomic blast. Or just imagine, Tabbert, the woman staring off in the distance, seeing a giant guy just See, that's some things about the story you never think about. You know, the giant falls off the freak. I mean, we learned this message, you know, all too well in the final arc of Bleach. You know, where Gerard Valkyrie's fighting on the Varwelt, and they're like, okay, we got to be really careful not to like just push this guy off because, you know, he falls. A giant falls down with such speed. You know, when he slams into the ground, it's not going to be a fucking cartoon. It's not going to be like he lands in a hole perfectly shaped like his body, and he crawls out of the hole with fucking little freaking birds tweeting around him like tweet 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 tweet. You know, it's going to be like it's going to be a fucking atomic blast size freaking explosion. A huge shockwave hit everyone, knocking them down and leaving a huge dust cloud in its wake. After several minutes of panic, Tabbert got to his feet, checking around for survivors in the dust. The farmhouse was completely destroyed, and the cop cars and ambulances were flipped over. Eventually, Tabbert ended up at the base of the beanstalk. You know, he's stumbling around in the dust. He doesn't know where he's going. He's like, oh, is anyone who's not dead, you know? He could barely make out a shadow in the dust approaching him, thinking it was a survivor. But after a while, the shadow began to run towards him quite fast. The shadowy figure emerged in front of Tabbert, and as the dust began to settle, it was revealed that it was a small boy wearing ragged clothes covered in dust from the blast. He was holding a huge sack of what appeared to be gold coins in his left hand. "Hi! My name's Jack!" the boy exclaimed, seemingly unaware of anything that had happened around him. Very cheery kid. What? Where did you go? What happened? Tabbert could only mumble a few words to the boy, who looked up at him with a very cheery and innocent smile. "I climbed up the beanstalk and met a mean giant. He chased me around, but then he fell off and died. Then I took all of his gold so me and my mom could live happily ever after." Tabbert could only stare at the child in utter shock at the boy's story. This is the epilogue. This is more of like a narrator at this point. Eventually, more police and paramedics arrived on the scene to help. There were 22 casualties total from the explosion, and 16 people were injured. It took the United States government 3 years and over $5 billion of taxpayer money to remove the beanstalk. Thanks, Obama. As it connected to a land with a dangerous giant species, and after several meetings, you know, at the cabinet, they decided, okay, well, we have this giant beanstalk that leads to a land populated by giants that would probably kill us all if they ever managed to climb down it, so we should probably get rid of that thing ASAP. Oh man, it was a mess too. I mean, there were people on the internet bitching about save the beanstalk, you know, hashtag save beanstalk, you know, it was nuts. Jack's mother survived the explosion and was convicted of child endangerment and abuse. I didn't exactly know what the law is, you know, if there's something specific. But anyway, she's currently serving 10 to 15 years in state prison, so good for her. You know, it's funny because because reading the original story of Jack and the Beanstalk, I discovered, of course, like, you know, the mother sent her, you know, son to bed without any supper. And that was like sort of a punishment for a while, you know, for a long time. It was just like, you go to your room without any supper. And I've never had that happen to me. I don't know if you have ever had, but think about that in terms of punishment. Like, you did something bad, therefore you don't get to eat. I mean, that's pretty fucked up if you really think about it. I mean, take away your television or your Xbox or something. Food is kind of necessary. I mean, like, that's kind of important, you know what I mean? Anyway, Jack was placed in foster care and was diagnosed with a litany of psychological problems, including PTSD. I mean, come on, the kid, you know, witnessed a lot of shit, had to, you know, climb up to the top of the beanstalk. You know, a giant died before his eyes. He witnessed death and mass destruction. I mean, it fucks a motherfucker up, let me tell you. This is the end of the story. Officer Tabbert retired from the force afterwards and got into the publishing business, where he sold millions of copies of his new book, Jack and the Beanstalk. It was a grim, non-fiction book that relayed the events of that tragic day from a first-hand experience. Sort of like a first-hand account of like 9/11 is what I was going for here. Like, Jack and the Beanstalk, New York Times bestseller. The grim tale of a boy that discovered a land full of bloodthirsty giants that resulted in the deaths of 22 people. It was a great read, but damn, it was a tearjerker. So that was my story. I passed the class, by the way, in case you were curious. It's kind of good also. I had a lot of fun writing that because my final paper for the project, my final paper for the class didn't turn out all that well. It actually turned out rather poor, to be honest with you. So I'm glad that I managed to, at least on the final, I managed to come up with something that I feel was at least to my fullest potential. I enjoyed. So I hope you enjoyed too. My retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk. And if you're curious about the whole Benjamin Tabbert thing and you didn't want to go look it up, Benjamin Tabbert was the original publisher of Jack and the Beanstalk back in like 1808 or some shit like that. So that's the reason I went to get. There was also a guy that published it later on that it was also regarded. I think his name was, it was 2 J words. It was like John Jones or something like that. And I was going to have his name be the Sergeant, but I figured, you know what, let's just keep it simple because it's just a short story. Let's just throw in, Jack, because everyone knows Jack. That's the title of the story, of the fairy tale. And also the main character, Officer Benjamin Tabbert. He's seen some shit. Well, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This will be Teching 101. And hey, if you want to do that yourself, if you want to go ahead and find your own fairy tale to rewrite, I found it as a very interesting assignment. It was very unique for a final. So thanks to my professor for doing that. Thanks, Pat. Teching 101 signing out. Later.